Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Alta Group Latin American region and emerging markets and Invigis, I welcome you to participate in this webinar, Preserving the Value of Your Leasing Portfolio in the Wake of COVID-19. My name is Hans Gijssen and I'm the regional leader for the Middle East and Africa with Invigis EMEA. I hope all of you, your families and staff are safe and healthy. Our audience consists of participants from Myanmar, Georgia and South Africa to Mexico, Puerto Rico, Argentina and Brazil. As the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 a pandemic, in over 200 countries restrictive measures were introduced by the local governments in order to minimize all risks. In our previous webinar, we gave you an overview of the impact of COVID-19 to our businesses. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought a lot of economic uncertainty, which directly impacts the value of the portfolio of leasing companies, since it tends to elevate the delinquency rates and potential credit losses. The good news is that there are best practices and technologies that prevent damages that otherwise would be suffered by leasing companies. This webinar will address the key practices and technologies. My friends and colleagues, Rafael Castillo-Triana, CEO of the Alta Group Latin American region and emerging markets, and Ian Robertson, Executive Director in Invigis EMEA, will guide you through this presentation. And in addition, we also have Niels Spitters, Managing Director of Intrador. The webinar will take approximately 1 hour. After this presentation, we will get back to you and you will have time for questions. A panel will answer your questions as much as possible. Well, how does the webinar work for you? At this moment, you are all on mute. When we will start the Q&A session, guided by our colleague Catherine Foster, the mics will be open for those who have a question. Just use the hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom program screen. You will then be unmuted and can announce your name and ask the question to the panelists. However, there's also the option to write your questions in the Q&A section during the presentation. If it's not possible for us to come up with an immediate answer, we will answer those questions per email. Our panelists are Rafael Castillo-Triana, Juan Neil Dodds, who is Senior Managing Director of the Alta Latin America Group, Niels Spitters, and Hans Gijssen. This webinar will also be recorded and will be available on YouTube shortly. We will inform you accordingly when it's available. Well, now it's time to start with our presentation, and I wish you all an interesting and useful webinar. Rafael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hans, and thank you everyone for coming in. Good morning and good afternoon for all the attendees. I appreciate very much that you are following our webinars where we are trying to share our experience and lessons learned in former crises regarding this crisis. Let me first of all talk about the general subject that we need to touch today. The objective is to get some good practical ideas and action items to preserve the value of your portfolio against the impact of COVID-19. I want to walk you through what we need to face in the current years, but I would like to make an introduction just for bringing to the memory something that was part of the agenda of best practices for equipment leasing companies around the world. We were talking about the new standard that was adopted and started to be enforced in 2016 for all these companies that were complying with the international financial reporting standards. And in particular, we were referring to a standard that was not very much publicized. In the leasing business, we were focusing on the new accounting standard for leases, that was IFRS 16, but we didn't pay too much attention to IFRS 9 until it hit us. And when it came, we realized that we were not even close to complying with that. IFRS 9, we actually have a separate workshop and webinar about IFRS 9, but for what is relevant here, this is the accounting standard that that emerged from the 2008 crisis and provided the needed guidance for companies, especially for leasing companies, to protect the potential impact of credit losses. And part of the discipline that was being created around the compliance of IFRS 9 was creating a structure for predictive analytics, being able to anticipate what is called the current expected credit loss, until something unexpected happened, and which is exactly COVID-19. COVID-19 came as an unexpected situation. Some people call it a black swan. I would say that in general it is, but the author of the book of Black Swan says it was not a black swan. What he means is that we should be able, we should have been able to prevent that a pandemic could hit us, but we never believed in that. So now it hit us, and what I can tell you is that in our perception of the facts, we have been following all the facts that come from the pandemic's scientific situation to the economic effects of that. And I would say that our conclusion is that the world is going to be certainly different after this pandemic. And we need to capitalize on the lessons that we should learn from this pandemic. You'll see the World Economic Forum has an interesting video that is published in YouTube. I'm going to skip that, although I have it loaded in my computer. It's a 3 minutes long webinar that actually provides the testimony of Professor Nouriel Rubin from Columbia University, where he basically underscores the fact that this economic impact is even worse than the effect that we received in 2008, and even different to the effect of the Great Depression of the 1930s. And the main reason for that is because this is a global recession, if you want. It's a global economic impact that certainly we need to be prepared about it. What is the meaning of that? Well, again, the question is not today whether or not the COVID-19 was a black swan. You may remember that the black swan is an expression that is used for unforeseen events. It was actually illustrated in the experience of the Dutch, who actually broke the general belief that mankind had in terms that swans were only white. All the general description of biology about the swan is that it was a white animal, until the Dutch arrived to Australia and they found a bunch of black swans. And that, of course, was a big surprise. So here, the pandemic has been characterized as a big surprise. Most people say that we should have been able to predict that. But the reality is that it has hit us. And it has hit us, it has an impact on my leasing company and my portfolio. And the questions that we need to answer, and we are trying to provide some ideas and some technological tools for that as well, is that what we need to really find out is how to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 to our portfolio, and how are we going to recover that. What is going on today? Well, the reality is that the regulators decided to go for the easy route. And the easy route is what is, there is an English word that is called procrastination. That probably doesn't have too much translation in other languages, but what it means is exactly what the ostrich is doing here, putting the head under the sand to ignore what the reality is bringing to us. And that's exactly what the Bank of International Settlements did in April when they issued document 498. It's available online if you want, and we have a copy if anyone is interested to see that. The European Central Bank in March 12, that's exactly 1 day after the World Health Organization declared the pandemic as a global event, the European Central Bank issued a regulation saying to the banks, don't worry, you don't need to create reserves. but make sure that you amend all credit agreements or leasing agreement, all the financing agreements that you have that support your portfolio, so that your clients will have a forbearance. Forbearance is, by the way, the most used word today. Forbearance means your obligation is now being deferred until a future time. And the problem is that we don't know how long is going to be that future time. In principle, the regulator said, let's wait for at least 3 months. And that's what we have been seeing as the general guidance that has been followed by all the institutions that are subject to regulations by central banks or similar institutions. So this is exactly where we have seen that is happening among the bank and financial institutions. Maybe you are familiar with the story of Alice in Wonderland. There was a character in Alice in Wonderland that was the rabbit, the white rabbit. The white rabbit was always in a hurry, but he didn't know why. And the reason why we compare this with the rabbit is that because we have had the contact with some of our clients that are bank-affiliated leasing companies, independent leasing companies, and they say, I'm sorry, I'm overwhelmed right now of work. I need to run because I need to deal with my portfolio and my clients in order to renegotiate that. The problem is that the way they are renegotiating that is either giving them additional time to pay or asking them to, okay, pay me just a portion of what you owe and let's defer the rest. But there is no correlation between this kind of rearrangements or restructures and the economic reality that is underlying that. And this is the main purpose of this webinar. We want to really bring to you to the actual realities and provide the tools that should isolate ourselves from the tendency of the white rabbit of Alice in Wonderland. So let's start looking for the tiger that we have in the cage, the credit risk. The cage is open, the tiger is coming up and is going to probably bite us. How does the tiger could bite us? And that goes into the basic of credit risk management. In a simplified form, and that has been part of the training courses we have been giving, in order to understand which are the main aspects that you need to focus when you look at the credit risk, we focus in the 3 pillars that are the 3 C's of credit: the character, the capacity, and the collateral. You need to focus in these 3 because that's where exactly something may go right or wrong. The first one, and I'm going to drill down a little bit on that, the character is probably the most important one of them. To be honest, in my almost 40 years of practice in the equipment leasing and financing industry, the only cases where I have been forced or my clients have been forced to write off credit receivables coming from leasing transactions have been where the customer character was misread. When we made a mistake, we didn't understand that the character of the customer was a poor character. So certainly character is the most important guide in this case. When we deal about capacity, capacity means the possibility of the customers to generate cash flow to meet their obligations. So the difference between the lack of character and the lack of capacity towards credit risk is that in the case of character, the customer don't pay because they don't want to pay. In the case of deficiency in capacity, even if the customer wants to pay, is not able, he or she is not able to actually comply because the economic reality, the cash flow that they generate, the resources they have are not sufficient to pay. And finally, we are supported by the collateral. And the collateral is, we are going to focus most of this webinar in the evaluation of collateral. That's the reason why we are bringing Nils Peter here to help us and to show a very interesting tool that helps to monitor and follow up and recover value based on the understanding of the economic reality of the collateral. So let me drill down a little bit on character. We have been working in trying to improve the quality of character evaluation that our clients follow when they evaluate transactions. This is unfortunately a focus that has been mostly ignored. And the main reason it has been ignored is that because the best approach to evaluation of character came for a tool that was initiated in 1955 by the couple of Fair and Isaacs. And they created the so-called FICO score, which of course is used for consumer lending, but is the closest judge of character. And they created some basic criteria that basically provide or build a profile of payment habits by the customers. And of course, they were focusing in consumer customers, but the point is that consumers are persons, and individuals, are the managers who decide what is the destination of the cash flow and the payments of a corporation as well. So if we want to evaluate character, is not to say, oh, there is a corporation, I cannot evaluate character. No, you need to evaluate the character of the shareholders and the managers of the organization. And for that purpose, you need to have a tool. So some institutions use the FICO score as a metric. And they say, okay, let's follow the FICO score. Let's reinforce that with some bank references, with trade references. Let's follow the KYC routines, which means know your customer, to see how the morality and the ethical values of these customers are there. And once we have all that information in our files, so we should be okay. And actually, that's not the reality. So we started drilling down, and we found in the psychological school, the positive school of psychology, the tools to really evaluate and create a scoring system for evaluation of character, and is basically based in the features of a good character, which are wisdom, courage, humanity, transcendence, justice, and moderation. And each of these 6 pillars, if you want, have different expressions. So wisdom can be identified by the creativity, the curiosity, the judgment, and the love of learning and perspective that an individual may have. Courage has a connection with the bravery, persistence, honesty, and zest. Humanity has a connection with love, kindness, and social intelligence. Transcendence has a connection with appreciation of beauty, gratitude, hope, and sense of humor. Justice has to do with the ability to work in teams, the sense of fairness, and leadership. And moderation has to do with forgiveness, modesty, prudence, and self-control. So if you translate that, by the way, this is the main source of information about that. It's a book written by Professor Christopher Peterson and Martin Selman from the University of Pennsylvania and Michigan University, who actually really put a very good tool in there, very well supported, that is the basis to the creation of a scoring system. And the scoring system is based on what is the impact that a deficiency in character could generate on default or leading to the default of an individual customer, and what is the actual importance that lack of feature of character can generate. So for example, if you have a customer that lacks creativity, certainly in front of adversity is not going to be or to react very positively, is going to be paralyzed. So the importance that creativity has among the judgment of character is very high. In addition to that, if it lacks curiosity, has inability to innovate. And this is also related to other features of character. One of the things that you can find is that if the customer is low in the sense of justice, and you can really detect that from several of its behaviors, it will fail to understand that the creditor is unallied. And one of the things that generally happens in these cases is that the customer or the client, the obligor, becomes an enemy, if you want, of your company. You become the enemy of them. They forget that you help them in the good moments, and now you are the bad character of the movie. So they are going to fight with you. So that's part of the whole process. So based upon the different features of this graduation of character, that of course is going to be available for you upon your request, and we will be happy to walk you through that because it has proven to be very effective. The bottom line that we suggest in these cases is that you create a scale where you can actually score and rate your clients based on character. And if you have that scoring for your existing clients, you undertake that exercise with your existing clients, that will help you to select actually which of the clients are the most important clients to be subject to a potential workout, restructure, working with them in trying to find a good solution with them. If the character is poor, certainly what is going to happen is that the customer or the obligor is going to be tempted to use one of these three legal GOST or three legal tools that they could have at hand. One of them is to invoke the force majeure exception to avoid payments. And it's important to mention that force majeure has a different behavior in civil law and in common law systems. In civil law and Sharia law as well, force majeure is actually a cause for stopping paying obligations. So if the customer goes to the courts in a civil law environment or in a Sharia law environment, they could be excused to pay using the pandemic as an excuse for that. In the Anglo-Saxon law system, it is more demanding because they require that force majeure should be defined in the corresponding agreement. So if it's not defined, so it doesn't give relief to the customer. But this is something that is very, very interesting to pay attention to. The second possibility that may exist is the application of the rebus sic stantibus clause, which is actually the possibility to get equitable adjustments based upon the challenges of the pandemic. So this is something that also has been enacted in several civil law countries. In Sharia law is also admissible until the al-suruh al-tariya principle. And what it provides is that under unforeseen events, the obligor can ask to the court to equitable adjust or reduce, for example, the lease payment or extend the terms to be able to meet this obligation. This is something that is going to be subject to this. I want to remind that we have the question and answer session at the end, so we'll be happy to attend the question. You can also write your question at this moment if you want. We'll be happy also to answer as soon as we have this presentation finished. The third legal cost that emerges in this case, obviously it works on the other side, especially it works when you owe money to a financial institution, is the application of the MAC clause. MAC stands for Material Adverse Change, and is a clause that is included in certain agreements that allow the customers or the obligors, allow the creditors to early terminate and demand full payment of the amounts that are due. So these are the three legal tools that certainly are going to be, and you can start looking at what is going on currently in some publicized cases. These are the main instruments that are being used. So once we evaluate character, the next step is to evaluate capacity. And capacity means evaluating the capital and the cash flow of the customers. The principle is very simple. The economic capacity breaks when the lessee's cash flow drains, when we don't have more cash to come. And this is something that is happening very, very often and is very important in these times of COVID-19. To give you an example, the Financial Times published an article a week and a half ago about the state of the airlines, the global airlines. And it showed, for example, that the airlines like Lufthansa has been always the benchmark of the best management in airlines business, only had three months cash flow left. And it's interesting because yesterday it was announced that the German government decided to buy a stake in Lufthansa. 20% of Lufthansa now belongs to the German government, and therefore they have a cash injection received from the Federal Republic of Germany. By the same token, yesterday also, the French government and the Dutch government announced that they together are providing a bailout to Air France KLM, also to allow them to recompose themselves. Under the emergency package in the United States, also American Airlines, United, and Delta were favored with special loans and facilities. And we have Latin American airlines like Avianca and LATAM that have filed for Chapter 11 protection in the courts of the United States, in the New York courts. So, and that's because this is what is happening to them, to the airlines. Their cash flow is being dried. So we need to get back to the basic components of the cash flows. And as you may remember, and this is one of the good contributions made by the accounting discipline, the statement of cash flows focus in three types of cash flows. Those that comes from operating activities from the business itself. Those that come from investing activities, the inflows and outflows from investing activities. And the third one is those that come and go from financing activities. So when we get into these difficult situations coming from the economic downfall led by COVID-19, certainly the first suggestion is let's sit down with the client and examine the cash flow that comes from their operating activities. If you have a customer that has a restaurant, for example, we'll certainly need to look at how the restaurant is generating revenues. If it's closed because it has a lockdown, the question is if they are able to have a drive-in or a delivery system as part of the distribution system. We have seen that in many restaurants, and they are really doing well after using this new approach and this new strategy. So this is one of the key issues that we need to consider moving forward. So and that's one of the suggestions that we bring to the table. So instead of doing what the financial institutions are currently doing, which is just extending terms without analyzing how the cash flows of the customers are going to be impacted, we really and strongly suggest that we should drill down and sit down with them doing that. And that goes to what we call the stress test of capacity. One of the things that is happening, besides the lockdowns that are generating effects, but now as you can see in most of the countries, the lockdowns have been relieved, and then people are coming back to the business. I personally don't know if it's a wise move or not. I would say that is not a wise move. Probably we are going to create a higher problem than the one that we're trying to solve. But the thing is that at the end of the day, several things are changing. And one of them is that there is an overall disruption in supply chains. And this is giving a lot of interesting lessons. We discussed that in our last webinar. The disruption in supply chains are driving the companies to understand very well how vulnerable they are for what happens to their suppliers and the suppliers of their suppliers. And also how vulnerable they are for what they happen to their customers and the customers of their customers. And that's part of the exercise that you need to undertake with them in order to understand the business and really mold and carve out the way as the workout agreement should operate. Because you should be able to build a workout agreement that the customer should be able to comply with. It doesn't make any sense giving today a forbearance, which is you don't pay for 3 months. If after the end of the 3 months, the customer doesn't have a cash flow, so you are going to be in a situation that you are going to put the ball out of the stadium several times and you are not really solving the problem. The way to solve the problem is understanding better the business of the customer, how the operating cash flow is working, and in that way, you can not only recompose the way as the contract is structured, but also you can also provide the ability to increase your collateral. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about that. So what the data is currently showing us is very important in terms of which are the industries that are more sensitive to the effects of the COVID-19. So we are seeing that with the filing of Chapter 11 in the areas of retail, for example. I mean, there are, let me explain a little bit because probably not everyone is familiar with what Chapter 11 means. Chapter 11 is a chapter of the bankruptcy law of the United States. And it became the model of insolvency worldwide. Actually, the United Nations Commission for International Trade Law, UNCITRAL, adopted the US bankruptcy code as a model for other countries. And that provides a special room, if you want, for the obligors that are in challenging situation to seek a restructuring or their indebtedness with their creditors. And it's interesting to observe that Latin American airlines, for example, they are filing in the United States courts to get protection. One of the main reasons why they are doing that is that most of their assets are aircraft that are leased, and normally this jurisdiction that has been selected in these lease agreements is the jurisdiction of the courts of New York. But also because they have good provisions that protect both parties. It protects very well the position of the creditors, and it protects very well the position of the obligors. So now we have a situation where passenger airlines are going certainly into restructuring procedures prior to insolvency. Under the bankruptcy law in the United States, there is another chapter, which is Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the liquidation of the company. So if the company is not able to really manage the new structure, so it needs to be liquidated. And that will be in Chapter 7. So I believe certainly that we are going to have certain challenges in terms of Chapter 7, especially in retail companies like J.Crew, like Neiman Marcus, these famous brand names that probably they are not going to be along for many years because the business also has changed, which is one of the lessons that we need to learn from the COVID-19. So we have here, this is an analysis made by Moody's that is very interesting. And of course, you have some other industries that are really doing better during the pandemic. One of them is certainly the internet service companies, the Amazons.com of the world, and also the food companies. They are making better. They are doing very well, and you can see that several of the retailers like Walmart or Target, they have moved into what we call the lower parts of the Maslow needs pyramid, which is very useful. This shows a little bit the most hit industries in the United States in terms of unemployment, which is a good indicator of also challenges in their operating cash flows. Leisure and hospitality is one of them, hotels. So we don't have a record of hotels that are in challenge, but and filings of Chapter 11. While we have a recent record of mobility business that are currently also having trouble. One of the cases is in particular the case of Hertz. Hertz filed for bankruptcy protection last Monday. So we are certainly following a good trend on that. Mobility is also changing, and that's very important for us to take into account because part of our portfolio, an important part of our portfolio is represented by motor vehicles. So these are the areas that you need to observe, and that's part of the exercise that needs to be undertaken with the customers. So in general, the suggestion is go first, take a look to your existing portfolio, filter that for the character of the customers, and I'm going to answer the question a little bit more later about how we follow that psychological analysis and how we gather data from in order to be able to build a scoring system on that. Once you selected the customers based on the character, then you go into the second step, which is the good characters are the ones that really deserve your investment of time in order to drill down with them and undertake the stress test under this situation and see how you can help them to weather the storm of the challenges they have with their operating cash flows under this situation. And the question is how this post-crisis look like. To the left, you can see that the International Monetary Fund built some scenarios based upon the assumption of what is called a V recovery. It has the shape of letter V, V-shaped recovery. We have other tendencies like a Bloomberg analysis that says probably it's not going to be a V, it's going to be a U. But if you ask me, I would say that actually we don't have a V or a U, we may have probably an omega. And the omega means that we will have a very different reality. Certain industries are not going to recover at all. Certain industries are going to emerge as new. And there are several hypotheses, interesting hypotheses. For example, in the transportation business, there is going to be a dramatic change. We have seen, for example, new tendencies where in many countries, the sale of bicycles have been dramatic. People are going out in bicycle because it's safer, because you have lesser exposure to the virus if you go and ride in a bicycle as opposed to taking an Uber that transports you from one side to the other. Because the Uber is going to have the effect of what is called the aerosol effect, which is the virus can really float within the car with closed windows held by the air conditioning. But you don't have that problem if you are in an open air. And that's one of the main reasons why the sales of bicycles have increased very much. So we are experiencing a very important change of the economic industries that are going to drive the GDP formation in the future. And this is one of the things that we need to be aware of. So if we're going to implement workouts, well, one of the things that we suggest is the following. Once you understand the operating cash flows of your customer, well, try to use advantages of the collateral registries. Many of your countries have already enacted the secure transactions laws, which provide the possibility to expand pledge in a similar way as it works under the Uniform Commercial Code of the United States. And that provides a very interesting possibility because we are going to see that one of the things that you need to take care of is the value of your collateral. And that's part of what Nils Peter is going to talk about. But if the collateral itself, if the equipment itself is not going to support the value at risk that you are going to have after the workout, so you need really to look for alternatives to expand your collateral. And one of them is to use the collateral registries that allows, for example, the pledge of future assets. You can then work on a structure where future revenues coming from several business of the customer can actually provide an interesting additional collateral. You can structure what is called the merchant cash advances, which is just a specific pledge of new revenues that are coming. Inventory pledge, and you can also pledge of future receivables. All of that can be really structured under the workouts, and this is something that you need to take a look on that. Now, the final mention that I want to make on this is about the collateral. Of course, I'm going to go very, very fast on this because the collateral is something that both Ian Robertson and Juan Dodds and Niels are going to expand a little bit more. But what we believe that is important today is, number one, you need to analyze the overall behavior of the secondary markets for the leased goods. Be prepared. Understand exactly how the secondary markets are working and what are the tendencies of these secondary markets to work. One of the observations, we had the discussion yesterday with some of our colleagues, precisely talking about the airlines. And the thing is that clearly, when you take a look of all the restructuring plans of the airlines that are under Chapter 11, or if you take a look of the conditions that the German government imposed to Lufthansa, all of them require that the airlines need to get away from some of their existing aircraft. So the overall secondary markets of commercial aircraft is going to be oversupplied. And that means that probably the tendency will go for prices to go down. If you take a look to the secondary markets of motor vehicles, well, that's one of the things that you need to think about, because one of the effects that the COVID-19 is creating is that a lot of people have realized that they don't need to commute to work if they can really manage themselves to work remotely in a good way using these technologies like the one we are using at this moment. So these are part of the things that you need to sit down and review the secondary markets of leased goods. The good news is that we have that information available, so you can call us and we'll be ready to help you in that connection. The other thing that we need to be aware of is the effect of the devaluation of the local currencies in the local market value of competitive goods or substitutes for leased goods. This is something that for emerging markets is a kind of blessing. It helps, because when we have issues with the value of our currency, when there is a devaluation of our currency, it becomes more expensive to import new equipment. So therefore, the secondary markets become better. And then if you are already the owner of certain assets, probably this is going to be a positive factor for the possibility to use the trade route to recover your value. But now the point is, how do you manage repossessions? And then our suggestion is twofold. Let's go back to the good character customers. If after you analyze with the customer the operating cash flows and all the other alternatives they have in their investment cash flows and financing cash flows, and you realize that they are not going to have a viable business, at least not with your equipment. So it will be nice to get into a voluntary repossession plan. On the other hand, you need also to prepare a very effective repossessing strategies, call your litigation lawyers, and build a very sound strategy to repossess the assets from the bad character customers. Because certainly this is one of the key things that you need to have. So at this moment of time, and I would like to welcome our Ian Robertson. Ian, I am going to mute myself and give you the microphone at this moment. So please, thank you for coming with us, and thank you for your bright help.
Raphael, many thanks. Good afternoon and good evening, everybody, or good morning to our friends in the Western Hemisphere. But I'm going to spend the next couple of moments just walking through a very short deck of slides, and really to the point that Raphael was making earlier in the previous slides and in the earlier discussion. We're going to talk a lot around the topic of the collateral itself. The slides you may already be familiar with if you attended the last session, so I won't go into too much depth on the slide because you've probably already seen it before. I think in addition to looking at the kind of key business processes, the internal view, let's say from the lessor perspective, it's maybe also worth thinking about the equipment life cycle and the equipment supply chain and reverse supply chain as well, just to think that through. And I guess we've got a diverse group of people on the call today. But it's maybe worth reflecting on your own businesses and the financial solutions that you yourselves have, and which parts of the value chain that you sit within, and related to that, obviously, which risks that they may be exposed to. And in that, what I really refer to is I guess 4 or 5 kind of key areas of risk and areas that I think are worth paying attention. You know, the topic of the discussion is how do we preserve value in the portfolio, and I think you can look at that in a number of ways. And one of those is to, you know, see potential risk areas around, you know, your distributors, your dealers, resellers. It's pretty obvious, I think, that the end customers present a potentially very, very significant area of risk and attention required there. And I think we've spent time in the past answering and addressing questions in relation to, you know, restructuring, trying to keep the equipment wherever we can in such times with the end customers. You know, proactive portfolio management strategies, workouters, and restructure that Raphael just referred to. And then clearly doing your level best in terms of the repossession activity, the asset recovery, the reconciliation of the equipment, and understanding if the asset is indeed what you anticipated to be returned. And is it complete? Is it in the condition you expected? So these are all kind of central areas of value creation and potentially value at risk. And maybe the area that is perhaps often overlooked and I think, again, from personal experience, is worth paying attention to, particularly in these very unusual times where travel is clearly more difficult and challenging than usual. That's also your repossession and remarketing partners. Equipment sitting in a stockyard or sitting in a warehouse. Hopefully, it is still sitting there. It's in good condition and it's being looked after. But again, being confident that that is the case, and the slide that we're looking at here really talks to the key topic which Raphael referred to earlier, which is cash flow. Ordinarily, any of the actors in the supply chain you would have done your reviews of, and you would regard them as trustworthy counterparts. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done business with them for years. But when they are in stressed scenarios, certainly there are alternate solutions that are referenced on this particular slide in terms of, you know, what you know, traditionally good actors might do in a position where their business is about to go to the wall, or you know, their personal situation dictates that they need to do something rather extreme to take care of their families and their own personal financial situation. And this, again, from experience, is an area that's really worth paying a lot of attention to, which is, you know, validating, are the assets where you expect them to be? Are they complete? Are they in the condition you expect them to be? And having a regular method of checking on that. And Niels will get into some of the solutions that his business has developed that tackles these particular issues. Obviously, you know, Niels will go into a great level of detail around the solution, but I think it is worth just emphasising again the importance of knowing what the equipment is, and be that with the end customer, or be that with the dealer, or wherever it is in the value chain. Leasing companies around the world, from, you know, the most developed economies to the emerging markets and everywhere in between, asset recording is notoriously poor. And I'm sure if you were honest and actually looked at your asset registers, you might be surprised how often the word other or miscellaneous comes up when it comes to an asset description. And clearly, when it comes to times such as we're facing now, and looking to in the coming months, probably as the level of defaults rises, you know, knowing what your equipment is and having confidence in in being able to have that discussion and organize a repossession and actually be able to identify your asset and recover your asset. It's really of critical importance, and mapped to that, and it goes back to the discussion point around portfolio management and knowing what decisions to take and actually how to restructure and what's economically good decisions to make in these scenarios. Knowing what the market value of the asset is currently and having some strong views on auction values in the marketplace today and dealer prices. Again, that's important information to be able to assemble quickly, map that hopefully based upon better data than other. So knowing what the make, model, year, and even the mileage if it's a vehicle, or the number of hours of use on some other collateral classes. You know, this is all very, very important information to help you protect the value of your portfolio through making good decisions, and then ultimately being able to realize that value either through redeploying the assets if they come back to you, or ultimately if you're remarketing the equipment. And this page talks a little bit also to human risk, which I haven't touched on. It really is again the theme of the bad actors, and some of that is just human nature, and you will always have a risk of that. Clearly, in the times that we're facing at the moment, the opportunity for that, both from a demand because of the potentially difficult personal circumstances that people might be facing, along with the fact that they may be getting a lot less oversight than they were in the past. That creates an opportunity that's larger than it has been in the past. And the other element, just to quickly touch on, because I think it is also quite important, and it actually relates to what Niels will get into around inspections, just having the competence to be able to identify the completeness of a specification, whether options are present that you might have been expecting, or even that the specification of the equipment is as anticipated. That requires a level of asset awareness and asset familiarity and knowledge. And again, not every person that goes out and looks at a piece of equipment necessarily has that capability and background. So the last bullet on here before I hand over to Niels is really the question: can digitalization help? And I think we all share a strong view that there's a very, very strong role that technology can potentially play in assisting with the management of all the risks that I just talked to. So Niels, if you're there, I think that's the last slide.
Yes, I'm there.
No, I'll gladly hand over the baton, and off you go.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Raphael. Good morning, good afternoon, all. I'm Niels Spitters. I'm over 15 years in the equipment industry and the leasing industry. One of my problems is that most of the times I have too much ideas and too much new plans to develop. And we like to work really with data. We believe that with data, you can really change your organization and helps your organization to grow. Sometimes what we say is that we are IT guys with a lot of equipment knowledge and with a lot of knowledge of the leasing industry. Well, what we like to do, where we like to help our customers with, is to minimize the risk and to maximize the control. What we just heard from Raphael and from Ian is that your business processes will change and will move more to fraud prevention, to manage your collateral, so your business is really moving, especially in this period. And we as a trader, we believe in helping you as a customer with machine learning tools and also with our inspection tools. We are a small company. We are based in the Netherlands. We have some developers, we have data scientists, we have business developers. So we are a quite small company, and we can move very fast around big companies like you. At the moment, we have developed 4 solutions to help financial institutions, manufacturers, machinery traders, that are most of our customers. And the 4 products we have developed at the moment are MarketWatch, the audit and remarketing app, and an auction solution. MarketWatch is more that we can give insights in the market, how the market is developing. We can compare brands with each other. We can compare different prices with each other, prices over different countries. We can give residual value lines. So this is really to give you insights in how the market is developing, but we can also compare your residual values with the current market values. In this presentation, in this part, we will focus ourselves on the audit app, on our inspection app, because with this inspection app, we really can help you to do fraud prevention, to give you a better insight in your equipment, if the specifications are still there, yes or no. This inspection app, we developed it together with one of the biggest vendor finance lease companies in the world. This company is based in the Netherlands. And what we hear from our customers, it's that they work faster, they work easier, they work cheaper, and they work smarter with the InTrader app. Why is this? Because with the app, people do not have to travel anymore. The financial institution is able to manage the inspections. And this app is really built to do fraud prevention. So some highlights of the app. The app is usable online and offline. What we do is when an inspection is performed, we do a recognition with AI. So we use machine learning to detect fraud. And we try to detect fraud by doing automatically serial number checks, by detecting if a photo is taken from a computer screen or if the photo is really taken from the asset, yes or no. Therefore, we built an AI model. We are also building an AI model to detect the position of an asset. We do checks on GPS track. What we also do is when somebody's taking a photo, for example, from a serial number, we automatically take a movie of 2 seconds. And with this movie of 2 seconds, we already identified some possible frauds. Because what you see is when somebody's taking a photo from a screen, then in this 2 seconds, the customer does not know, the inspector does not know that the movie of 2 seconds will be recorded, and is swiping away the photo camera or the mobile, and then you see a computer screen or another mobile device on your movie. The app is available in all languages. At this moment, it's translated to more than 15 different languages. And we can create it in your own branding. And we have a complete full back office system. All our servers, everything is running on our servers. Our servers are based in the Netherlands, but it's also possible to store service in other countries. If you like this, this possible, but it's all secured and it's all safe. And because it's all on our, everything is running on our servers, we are able to implement our systems in a really, really short time. And especially in this time with the COVID, we get a lot of requests for companies who are having problems with performing their audits and to eliminate their risk. With our systems, we're able to implement our systems in less than a week with new customers. So we can help customers really fast. Yeah, we can move to, yeah. How does the, in the app, we have some inspection flows. That's how we call it. The first inspection flow is the audit app. And in the audit app, what you do is just to check if the asset is at the location, yes or no. In the back office, you import a list with assets, you create the inspections, the dealer receives an email or a notification, okay, you need to perform an inspection, please create your account, download the app, and log into the app. When the dealer logs in, he sees a list of assets in the app. When he clicks on an asset, the first thing they will see is a question. Is the asset at your location, yes or no? When they click at the button, yes, the asset is at my location, the next thing they see is to take some photos. With the photos, they just have to take some photos. In this example, we ask for left front, the dashboard, our serial number, and we also ask for some questions. But this is all fully configurable. So it depends on our customer which questions we raise. What we always do is that we always ask for random some photos. So the inspector does not know what kind of photos you need to take or what kind of questions they need to answer. And this just to prevent fraud. We'll have a look at the current process of most of our customers when they need to perform inspections. Most of the finance companies, they will send out an external company or they will send their own inspectors to a dealer. Inspections are carried out at the branch of the dealer. The inspection company, they collect and process all the information and they send everything back to you as a leasing company. In a new situation, you click on, you create the inspections in our back office. The dealer receives an email real time. They download the app, they start performing the inspection. We do a check on 15 different points. All the data is sent real time back to our back office and to the financial company. And you have real time your information. And with this information, we eliminate risk. Your customer is more happy because what we hear from our customers is that the dealers, your customers, are not happy with the external companies, external inspection companies, because they arrive at the yard when they are busy with a customer, and then they want to perform the inspections. With the inspection app, your customers, the dealers, are able to perform the inspections at times when they want to perform an inspection. At 7 in the morning, in the weekends, in the night, it doesn't matter. When they have time, they can perform their inspections. External companies do not have to travel anymore. So with the app, with the use of the app, is really good for your carbon footprint. So these are some possibilities, some things for the some good things of the inspection app. Another process where you can use the inspection app for is for the repossession process. Raphael just explained you about the repossession, how important it is. When you need to perform a repossession process, you send a repo notification to the repo company, to the repossession company. They download the app, and when they arrive at the yard of the person or the company where they have to repossess the asset, they just take 3 or 4 photos from the asset. When they perform the inspection, they move the asset to a dealer or to a yard. They store it at the yard, and at the yard you can ask to perform a complete inspection with a lot of questions and with a lot of photos. When the asset is stored for several months at the dealer yard, or you can ask the dealer to perform some audits during this month. And when the asset needs to be sold, you can use your inspection, your complete inspection, which is done when the asset arrived at the dealer yard. You can use this inspection, or you perform a new inspection with new information, new photos, and you can start selling your asset. In this way, you have your whole process. You have a digital, you have the information digitalized, and it's all structured. You have your photos, and you build up your file to your customers also. Another possibility with the app is the remarketing process. When an asset needs to be sold at the end of the lease, you can send a notification 2 months before the asset is sold. 2 months before the asset, the contract is finished. You can send a notification to your end user. Okay, your contract will be finished in 2 months. Please, would you perform an inspection for us? Then you already receive some photos, and you figure out what the condition of your asset is. When it arrives at a yard, you can perform a very complete inspection with more than 150 photos, videos, questions. So you raise a lot of information. With all this information, you can start selling your used equipment, your used assets. Therefore, we created the auction website. With the auction website, you can raise for bids, and you can sell the assets to your traders. So also in this way, you receive a lot of information, and you really receive the condition of your assets. Another way where you can use the inspection app is in a restructuring process. A lot of companies raise requests for restructuring. So at this moment, a client contacts you, your company, with a request of a restructuring their contract. You create an inspection in the back office. You send out the inspection to your customer. Okay, I'm willing to restructure your contract, but please just perform a short inspection with a few photos. And when you've performed the inspection, we can restructure your contract. With the inspection, you raise all the information, and you can give a positive or a negative advice to your customer. We are able to combine all kinds of data. You have photos of your assets, you have the GPS location, sorry, and we do a check with AI on possible fraud. So these are just some examples where you can use the inspection app to help fraud prevention, to optimize your process, and to create your own database. Because that's also something we say, with using our systems, you create your own database. It's your data you're building up, and it's not our data, it's your data. And that's important for the future.
Thank you, Niels. I appreciate it very much. I think it's a very useful tool. We believe so, and we are committed to make sure that everyone gets the favor of using this system. Now we go into the question and answers section. This is going to be moderated by our Senior Managing Director and Asset Management Expert, Juan Neil Dodds. So Juan, I turn the microphone to you. If you can open your mic right now, and we can start dealing with the questions that are written. I think that there are some in the chat room and some other in the. So Juan, if you want to.
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Well, nice to meet you online, which is normal in these times. Well, I think, Rafael, the first questions we have open are in terms of legal. Is I think we had one in terms of, let me see. Hi, Rafael. We have customers quoting force majeure and declining to pay termination charges defined in the contract. What can we do?
Well, I think this is a very good question, and it's important to take into consideration that the right application of the force majeure clause should not be absolute. And of course, this is one of the main important things that from your legal counsel standpoint needs to be clear. When we were writing the Unit 1 model law of leasing, the question became what it will be the equitable solution when we have a situation where a leasing contract terminates in an abnormal way. Obviously, the normal way is that the term of the leasing agreement, at the end of the term of the leasing agreement, the customer has paid hopefully all its payments on time and have not created any hassle for the lessor. So the actual measure of the equity consideration in this case, and I mean equity not from the economic standpoint, but from the legal standpoint, was that the courts should provide a compensation to the lessor in a way that the lessor should be economically in the same situation it would be if the contract has been performed according to its original terms. So what this means is that, yes, you have termination charges in your agreement. These termination charges should be weighed by the courts in terms of whether or not they are excessive or they are enough to pay for the compensation that you should receive and you should deserve in order to keep your economic situation as expected. So that means in practical terms that the termination charges must not be zero, but probably they may not be the amount that you have set into the contract. For that purpose, in most of the cases, of course, there is not too much experience in jurisdictions other than the common law jurisdictions. But because in the common law jurisdictions, usually the solution comes from the retention of an expert witness. An expert witness is someone that, of course, is expert and understands the real economics that are involved into a leasing agreement and can really provide the court the information about what equity is all about. So the point is that if the force majeure deals to the leasing company to lose termination charges and suffer damages without any compensation, that will be unfair. That will be against equity. So the solution should be having this special expedient of using expert witness in order to evaluate the damages that the lessor suffers. So force majeure is going to partially excuse the continuation of the contract, but it should not result in actual losses for the lessor, not if it's possible to avoid that.
Okay, thank you. Well, we have a question from Luis Rubin. In the promotion area, it's always like a white rabbit, a credit approval time, and we make character impact scoring.
Well, that's a very, very good question. And the short answer to that question is training. I think that what we are suggesting implies two important organizational changes. One is to add to the policies and processes the evaluation of character and the scoring of character. The second one is, of course, to train the sales people and the credit people to be able to apply that. The good news is that nowadays technology and the openness of information provide a good basis to really evaluate and build the credit scoring system. The short definition of that is train the people to listen and observe aggressively to the traits of character of their customers. Something that probably we don't pay too much attention, but having a face-to-face meeting with the customer is very important. Review the behavior of that customer in the social media as well is very important. It's a revelation of character. You can see many of the traits of character of the customer based upon their behavior in social media. You can even evaluate the character of the President of the United States reading its Twitters. So it's something that really you can do if you provide the correct training, but also if you insert this methodology into your policies and processes.
Okay, thank you. If I might, I would like to add something to that. Very interesting how you separated different the different characteristics of character. One of those was justice, no? And I was thinking about how justice impacts the character of our lessee. And one is, well, the underlying law, and the other one is the probability of being caught, no? And I think that when I heard the presentation of Niels is, well, why is controlling your asset important? Is because of, well, if a customer has a high chance of being caught on a fraud or the disappearance of collateral or not properly maintaining the collateral, well, then he will take additional measures to perform as expected, you know, in terms of character. You know? So that's why control is essential in workouts. You know? If your customer thinks that, well, he has, for example, 10 forklifts leased and he's only using 5, well, he might be inclined to lend those idle 5 or sell, even worse, sell those idle 5 forklifts to other party. So control is essential there. Not only the contract, the underlying law, but the control we can have on those assets and the customer. Okay. We have an additional question from Mohamed Salah Quarashi. What are the potentialities of circular economy and recycling industry in leasing and preserving value of portfolios? I can take that, Rafael, if you
Yes, I was going to say that's your expertise.
Okay,
mm-hmm.
Okay, well, interesting. Well, it is normal when we are sending out leasing proposals that the term it matches what we expect the customer will use the asset. Interesting to understand what crisis can do in terms of the expectancy of an asset performing on a customer. Usually the term is the usual term of use is extended. So that gives us the opportunity, if we have a good performing asset, to restructure the contract and have a performing asset instead of a repossession and an asset in stock, which at this times with depressed remarketing market, I think restructuring should be the first choice. So having a proper understanding of the circular economy and the life cycle of an asset is a must. You need to revisit your secondary market channels to understand what's happening on the other end. For example, in IT nowadays, the remarketing channels are eager to get equipment. Now, there are a lot of people that are needed to change from the computer desktop at their office to notebooks. They need mobility in terms of home office. So there's a lot of stress on secondary market for IT equipment. On the other hand, you have like on cars, on mobility, that's a very depressed market. And well, companies that, for example, LeasePlan, when they saw that this crisis was leading to lockdown, they started reducing their stocks, their secondary market stocks as fast as possible to prepare for this storm that was coming. So they took good anticipated measures to cope with this storm.
If I may to add something, because I think that you have hit exactly the point. I think that the question is very interesting for many reasons. The first one is that certainly it leads that one of the things that leasing companies need to have today, I would say mandatory, is to develop their policies and processes around the life cycle of the asset, going not only to drill down on the life cycle of the contract, which is usually our first approach, but also going into the life cycle of the asset and then the life cycle of the customer itself. And one of the things that the COVID-19 is leading us to do with all these crises is that we need to understand better what is the life cycle of the business of our client. That's precisely the exercise that we believe that we need to undertake when we are trying to deal with capacity. But the most important part is what is going to happen with the assets. And I have asked myself this question because one of the things, the tendencies that we are seeing today, and I think it's a unique opportunity. Probably you have read several articles and press information and videos and everything that is showing that because of the COVID-19, the earth is recovering a little bit more of the purity of the environment, less contamination, less pollution. And that leads to the point that we say when we are thinking about mobility, mobility that has been driven most of the times by the use of fossil fuels that are highly contaminating. So probably one of the opportunities and potentialities that the circular economy may offer is to lead that conversion. And when I'm saying leading that conversion is related to the second aspect that is being brought by the COVID-19 crisis, which is the front page of The Economist last week was globalization is dead. And probably what that means is not that we are losing contact in a global environment. As a matter of fact, we are currently connected in more than 15 or 20 countries in this presentation, different countries. The thing is that, yes, the global connection doesn't die, but what we really will need to do, and we were talking about, for example, the importance of secondary markets being focusing on the local markets, because we are going to be protected by a shield of foreign exchange rates, devaluations, and so on. You may think about, for example, in the conversion, automatic or spontaneous conversion of cars from being driven by oil and gas engines to become powered by electronic batteries or something like that. It's a conversion that can be done in the country. It's a conversion that probably will fill up the possibility of using the circular economy and recycling industry in a better way. So I think that there are many potentialities that are going to be open on this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. And well, we have some, let me see in the chat, no? How do we evaluate customer psychological traits in practice to define character?
Well, in a way, I think I will underscore what we mentioned before, which is we need to develop, and according to the prevailing culture, I think that we should develop the ways to gather information on that. And I underscore the point that it should be according to the prevailing culture, because in some areas you can really inquire a lot of information about the character. In some cases could be personal information, and it's okay. It's socially acceptable. In some other jurisdictions, it could be considered a violation of privacy. But what we have been using in our environment is, as I mentioned before, one is analyzing the behavior of the customers in social media, and the other one is evaluating the behavior of the customers in the interaction we have with them. The point is that we need to be trained to understand which are the areas that we do need to focus, and that's the reason why these 6 pillars of the character are a good framework to analyze. So in a way, you provide to yourself, to your people, a kind of checklist or scoring system. They say, please look how creative is that customer. You can really observe that in many areas. How transcendent they are. I mean, in terms of the conversation, you can follow with the customer. How is the sense of justice? This is something that can emerge from just the conversation, or its personal attitude to certain areas, such as how is his family relationship going? How many divorces that person has? That creates also a very good indication of several traits of character. So there are many areas, and that could be fine-tuned according to the corresponding culture and according to the corresponding customer. But that's basically, an open door to drill down on that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question from Ali Diallo, a comment, no? How to address recovery issues after facing non-payment from customer. Well, and on that, I was making some memory in terms of, well, we were with the tequila, now with Argentine default, then we got the subprime crisis, and now COVID. No, there are some lessons learned from those 4 moments, and well, 3 and the one we're living now is that in my experience we followed similar like roadmaps in terms. What we did at the beginning is to put in place some task force, some particular task forces that were in some terms, well, built like in a 2-layered task force. One was with credit and asset management to, well, that task force, because we have to face a tsunami of workouts, that coming from the customers, or we have to prevent what we might have in our portfolios, So we had like a 2-layer task force. One is credit and asset management. Well, to understand from the credit perspective, the character, the capacity of the customer, and from asset management, the life cycle, to understand if we can extend and give us some additional periods, lower the payments, be together with the customer to see how we can help our good customers to cope with this storm, And while we had the second layer was composed with asset management and the lawyers to understand, well, which would be the action to repossess the asset if a workout was not what was recommended from the first task force. What we have to have very clear in our minds is that in most cases, the value in place of an asset is much higher than in the value in inventory, and much more on these days where the remarketing markets the secondary markets are depressed. So one of the objectives is to have that, to protect that value in place, and to have performing assets and not value assets in the inventory. You have to reanalyze the objectives of the different stakeholders of the company. For example, if you have the credit people have an objective, a bonus in terms of delinquency, well, they might be enticed to repossess an asset. So, well, they have like a recovery value and not a non-performing delinquent customer. But that might be very dangerous because, well, remarketing the asset is going to be very difficult in these times. The same might happen with the lawyers. Lawyers are, in some cases, thinking that their work is to repossess the asset. No, well, that's not might not be a good thing to do in these times. So it's very important that you have this credit and asset management task force in place to understand what contracts you can restructure and how to like be together with your customer and to have a good practice of customer retention of your better customers. No. Have a new message there? Yes.
Do we have a new message yet? Because no, I wanted to open the door if anyone wants to ask a question, and just I think that can raise their hand and we activate the microphone, or if anyone wants to make a comment or discussion. So just raise the hand and we will allow you to talk.
Okay, and I think those are the questions we have up to the moment, Rafael.
Yeah, I think so. We have Ali. Okay, one moment. We have Ali here, and we have Luis Arrieta. So let me Ali give the first the voice to Luis, and then we go to you. So Luis, I think that your microphone is activated.
Yes, Rafael, I'm here. Thank you very much for this presentation.
You're welcome.
As probably you are aware, we had been today, these last 2 months, restructuring most of the leasing transactions that we have. In our case, at least between 20 to 22% of the portfolio has been structured. And at the same time, we have to make the same thing with our financial banking support. I mean, all what we have, issue as these commercial paper and also banking financing. Now, and obviously we had been looking to be very close to the lessees or the customers, since we're trying to get from them the loyalty on this time. But what we are really aware is what is going to happen in September or October. After this time that we already gave them, 4 or 6 months to lower the rents and try to help them, what we don't know is what is going to happen, or this recovery will begin either in July or August. So we are really, what we don't know is what is going to happen really in the future, in the very close future, and I mean September. If this doesn't go to what they say, a new normal economic situation, and we defer these situations to next year, let's say January, February 2021, then I think that most of the financial institutions are going to be in trouble. And in the case of the leasing companies, I'm aware that, I don't know, but repossession of equipment is not going to be probably the best thing to do. I think, and I will like to hear your recommendation regarding it's make a new restructure, give the more term to these lease contracts, to these leases, or really go and repossess the equipment and try to go to the second market, where obviously is not it's an active as has been in the past. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a slowdown in the sale of used equipment. That's my question.
Yeah, and that's a very good question, Luis. Let me address that in several ways. One of the lessons that, because there are many lessons that we need to learn, we tend to forget, and especially because we say, okay, so let's eliminate the lockdown, and everyone behaves like nothing is happening, and nothing has changed. We still have the pandemic coming on. The economy is not going to behave the same because there are several things that we were forced to do and are going to be and are already game changers. For example, the use of technology, we were postponing the need to really create a framework to be more productive and more efficient using remote work. Now we were forced to do that. And that created and is creating kind of clusters around this, let's say, new economic satellite, this new booming that is generating new fields of opportunity for certain customers. And is rendering obsolete some other businesses that in the past were kind of the leaders of the economy. So that's part of the observation that we need to undertake when we sit down with our clients and we negotiate the structure with them. How is this pandemic and post-pandemic going to impact the viability of your business? And of course, I agree with you. We were discussing that with Juan a couple of days ago, because your concern about repossession or massive repossession is a concern that we receive from several even banking associations that were asking us if we have a formula to help them to cope with this large volume of assets that they will receive in inventory. And Juan mentioned in the experience, normally, of course, this is not an absolute rule, but it's a general rule nonetheless. normally the asset is better positioned to generate economic revenues if it's in the hands of the customer than if it's really in a storage, just creating dust as opposed to generating any kind of production. So this is part of the challenging situation that we are facing. In the past, we could afford the luxury of being very reactive. Reactive in a way that we are not concerned about the actual business of the customer or how this business is going to survive in this new normal. We were not concerned about that. Now we need to be concerned about that. We need to become, because we are already the partners of our obligors, of our lessees. Since we are the partners of them, so we need to behave like partners. We need to really care about their business. We need to really help them, see what is going on, how they can really manage the threats and opportunities that have been raised by this new normal. Because otherwise, we are not going to procrastinate. So we are going to say, okay, I wait for the V recovery to happen. Or probably if it's not V, so that means that I'm going to give you more time because it's going to be a U. I really don't believe that at this time, the recovery is going to be a U. It's going to be very different. It's going to show very different situations. Let me give you some examples. For example, in your country, in Mexico, and you are in a position situation. But I believe that one of the things that has been clear is that people started to pay much attention to key areas of the satisfaction of elementary needs of the humankind. For example, we were not paying attention to healthcare. Now we need. I mean, we're forced to do that. We were really ignoring the importance of the production of food. This is absolutely critical. And there are many things that are important. I landed incidentally into analyzing the story of the food stamps in the United States, how this is relevant and why this is relevant for us in the leasing business. Well, it's very relevant because one of the changes that is happening because of the COVID-19 is that we have a lot of population that is not accessible. They certainly are not in this webinar because they don't have access to technology. These are the people that sell the tacos in the street in Mexico. These are the people that don't have a formal employment. And for that kind of people, the United Nations himself is calling for thinking about the universal income solution. The best way to implement that is by the scheme of the food stamps, which was a very ingenious mechanism that was created in the United States. And it was based on expanding the capacity of the food production industry. So when you have areas like you have in Mexico and many of the countries that are involved here, Georgia is one of them, for example. When you have areas when you can really stimulate the production of staples, food, and provide certain solutions. So that could be, for example, one of the tendencies of a business. The business of restaurants need to change. The business of hotels need to change. I saw some of the hotels that were using their excess capacity to help with the quarantine in this moment. So they became a kind of healthcare provider, ultimately transforming their business model. This is something that is needed to be undertaken. We need to help our clients to understand what's going on, how they can transform and adapt their business model to the new economy, and then we can shape our workouts according to that, according to something that will generate a sustainable operating cash flow for them. That will be our approach. Of course, I may be wrong. I hope I don't. But these are some of the ideas that we believe that needs to be applied at this moment because the reality is changing.
And if I can add something to that, Rafael, is one of the big questions that we are talking about is, are we in front of a V recovery, a U recovery, or a omega recovery, as you expressed? One of the things that we can do in front of that uncertainty is to analyze if our workouts can transform the contracts to any type of pay-per-use contract, because if you can control the asset through tools as Niels presented, or telematics, we can change the approach of that equipment to a pay-per-use contract, so we can have a performing asset and be ready, have the equipment there in place with a contract that would allow the parties to go back to business as quickly as possible and in a profitable way, no?
Absolutely, I agree. Ali, the floor is yours. I think that you can unmute your microphone if you want.
Yes, thank you, Rafael, and congratulations for this very interesting presentation. And yeah, I asked a question and one answer to it clearly. What I wanted to do is to share some further thoughts with you regarding the recoveries issues that are addressed currently, because during this particular context of COVID-19, it's very important that the lessors, they really understand exactly and accurately the reason of why customers, they may or they default. Because there are several situations that they can face. And if they don't really read properly the situation, understand exactly why the customers, they defaulted, then in the recoveries process, they can be they can find themselves in a difficult position because they didn't understand well what was going on. I identified when I was looking at these kind of issues four main areas where we can try to see in which case, in which type of situation we are involved in. Sometimes we have a customer who will default, but then they would default because they are in a line of business where it's really proven now that the activity sector is in danger and for a long time. Then it means that the lessor, when he is in front of such a situation, it's important for the lessor to take appropriate measures and see how he will handle the situation in a situation where the line of business of the customer is really, is no more a performing line of business. So this is first. Secondly, we can be involved in a situation as a lessor where the customers, they really face a cyclical issue. It means that they will have challenges, but for a short period of time. And if the lessor doesn't address that situation properly, the lessor can tend to take strong measures against the customer, who will just need actually to be assisted for a short period of time, and allowing him actually to make it during that period and then be able to start paying again. Another type of situation faced is, and it happens a lot during the current time, is that we can see technical problems when a lessor is trying to recover. Sometimes the lessors who are non-banking financial institutions, they can recover through banks. And because of some disruptions in the systems, it can happen that a customer will fail to honor his commitment, but not because he doesn't have money or he was not very willing to pay, but just because there was a technical issue. So in such situation, it's important for the lessor to understand that the customer has no responsibility there. So it's important not to start, becoming stronger with the customer, making pressure to get paid, etc. Because the reason of the default is not due to an action that they would have taken. And finally, the character issue that you mentioned during the presentation is key because, and it can change. We can see that this is a situation that we all face that is new to all of us. And it means that sometimes people, when they face a situation that they are not used to face, or where they were not, anticipating anything as such, then they can be distracted, and then they can even change because not knowing what to do. And then it means that the character aspect is very important here. And if it happens that the lessor is in front of a customer who doesn't want to pay, and that the default is is created by this unwillingness to pay, then it's important for the lessor to take immediate measures. So this to say that we are really in a period where it's very crucial for all the lessors to try to really understand what are they experiencing as default, and make informed decisions based on a good reading and a good understanding that they would have on the situation and the case that they face, because each case can be different. Even if you have two customers who default at the same time, then they can default for a reason that is drastically different, and then you take measures that are drastically different as well. So it was just a contribution, because actually I raised the question and then upon answer to it quite clearly, but this is something that I wanted to add.
Well, thank you, Ali. I think that's very valuable, and I think that again underscored the importance of one of the key subjects here. One of the takeaways I would like that everyone takes with you is that there exists a technological cheap solution to inspect and know exactly what your assets are. The use of artificial intelligence allow you to know exactly what is the value in the secondary market that they have very quickly. So I think that one of the things that we have learned now from Neil's presentation is that there is a cheap, accessible technology, cheaper than the usual inspection process that we use generally, to be able to track your assets, to be able to know what is the value of your collateral. And this is very, very important at this time when we have the crisis, and certainly we are subject to increasing our value at risk because of the need to provide facilities to our existing obligors and customers. So having said this, I would ask Hans if you can give us the closure here, unless we have any additional question, but I don't see any question asked at this moment.
No.
So Hans, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rafael. Well, I want to thank every participant and also our presenters, Rafael, Juan, Niels, and Ian, for all the information that they have provided. And we will send you the information by mail. That will happen in the next few days. And in case of any questions, please feel free to get back to us. For the rest, thank you very much, and we wish you a very pleasant remainder of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.